Now, Luke Pollard, Minister for the Armed Forces, is with us this morning. Good to see you, Minister. Thanks for taking the time. When will the government increase defence spending to 2.5%?
Well, we've committed to increase defence spending to 2.5%, and the first step in that is a strategic defence review that will look at the capabilities that we need to deter the aggression that the UK and our allies are facing. That strategic defence review will be launched next week. We need that review to set out, importantly, what we want to spend that increased defence spending on and what sequence that will be spent. That will be a signal to British industry, because we want to direct any increased defence spending to UK companies first, to make sure that we're getting the kit and equipment that we need to keep the UK safe and to keep our allies safe in these especially difficult times.
So when will the review be concluded?
Well, the review will report to the Prime Minister and the Defence Secretary within the next year. We are designing this review to deliver at pace because of the urgent situation that we're facing.
That's not pace, a year. We can't wait a year, according to the top brass.
Well, we need it to be as urgent as we can. That's why we will be delivering this at pace, as fast as we can. We know that we're living in very difficult times. We know also that as a country, we've inherited a situation where our armed forces have been hollowed out and underfunded over a long period of time.
That's why they need the money now.
There is a need for investment in our armed forces, which is precisely why, as a new government, we've committed to get to 2.5%. But we need to make sure that we're spending that money in the right way and on the right kit and equipment. That's what the Defence Review will be setting out, because we know there are capability gaps that we have. If you look in particular, for example, at some of the military equipment that we've donated quite correctly to our friends in Ukraine, how we replace that equipment with what, and making sure we're learning the lessons from the war in Ukraine to deter any aggression and, if necessary, defeat it, is part of that defence review. But it will also look about how we drive.
Yeah. Just to be clear, Minister, you guys did not do any homework before you came to power last Friday. You've not looked into what needs to be spent where until you walk through the... OK, so why you need to wait a year then?
Well, you'll know, Kay, that in opposition, you don't get access to the classified briefings, the intelligence that would be required to set out what size and shape our armed forces should be. This defence review needs to be conducted not only with our armed forces, but importantly with our allies as well, because the UK would not fight any conflict alone. We would fight as part of NATO alongside our allies. And that's why we need to make sure that our capabilities are interoperable, that fit and match those capabilities of our allies. And that means supporting industry to grow the capabilities that we need, to provide the equipment, the ammunition, the missiles to keep our country safe.
OK, so the fact that former military leaders telling the government the UK is facing serious threats. We heard from the outgoing main man in the army saying that we are potentially only 5 years away from World War III. And you are telling my viewers this morning that it's going to take you a year to figure out where to spend the money.
Well, the assessment is broadly correct in the fact that we are facing difficult times. I don't share precisely the language that the general that you just cited used, but that's why we need to deliver this review at pace. We've set out our commitment to get to 2.5%. I think your viewers will appreciate you can't suddenly fill capability gaps overnight. We do need time to make sure that we're right-sizing our armed forces, making sure we have the equipment, the people and the investment in the right places. But I want to make sure we're spending this money well, because in the past, defence spending has not always been spent as well as it could be. Far too many contracts have been sent abroad where they could have been sent to British companies supporting jobs in British industries.
I'm sure some of my viewers will be surprised. Let's put it as surprised that it's going to take a year for you to figure out where to spend the money. Let me ask you, as a follow-up on that, when eventually you're going to get to 2.5%, are you going to get to 3% of GDP?
Well, the commitment that we've made is to 2.5% of GDP on defence. The strategic defence review that we will be launching next week is the first step to get there, setting out a roadmap effectively of what we need to be spending on, what capabilities to make sure that we are filling the gaps that we've inherited as a government, but also making sure we're developing the capabilities that we need to deter aggression. We need to learn the lessons not only from what's happening in Ukraine, but also with instability in the Middle East and the rise of other authoritarian countries around the world. This will this is a process that needs proper thought, proper reflection, but we want to deliver it at pace. It will be delivered within the first year of a Labour government, but there are decisions that can be taken already. One of the big challenges that we're facing as a country and our armed forces are facing is a retention and recruitment crisis. So making sure we're fixing the process that enables people to join the armed forces faster than they can at the moment, and importantly, stay in uniform, fixing defence housing, so we're not housing our armed forces personnel in pretty appalling accommodation. These are decisions that we are taking.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Minister. It's always a bit tricky when it's down the line. I know you're only up the road. It would have been great if you could come in. Maybe next time you can come in and we can have a little bit more time. Let me ask you before you go, how concerned is the government for a drop in support for Ukraine if President Trump takes office in November?
Well, we need to support Ukraine until they win. That's the long-standing position of British governments, both Labour and Conservative. We need to make sure that all our NATO allies are supporting that fight, and indeed they are. That means every single NATO ally spending 2% of their GDP on defence. But as you just heard from President Zelensky, it's important that we get the equipment, the ammunition to them fast. And that's why one of the first decisions taken by the new Defence Secretary, John Healey, was to accelerate the delivery of the promised ammunition and support that has been announced for Ukraine to be delivered within the next 100 days.
Would you care to answer my question, or are we just going to have to leave it at that?
Well, we want all our allies to be supporting Ukraine. That's our expectation, and we'll work with every single one of them, regardless of political stripe, to make sure they do so, because Ukraine's security is all our security. It's important for the United Kingdom, as indeed it is for the United States, that Russia does not win in Ukraine, because if they do win in Ukraine, they won't stop with Ukraine. And that's really important to keep all our countries safe so we can live in a free and democratic world. And that means every country in NATO supporting the effort, which they are, and I expect them to continue to do so.
OK, it's lovely to see you, Minister. Thanks for taking the time. Do come in and see us. We do good coffee and croissant and everything. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks, Kate.